The doctor's words echoed in my head like a broken record. We need to schedule the surgery as soon as possible. Without it, your condition will only get worse. I sat there in that sterile office, fluorescent lights buzzing above me, staring at the estimate paper in my trembling hands. $47,000. My stomach dropped. I had insurance, but it barely covered a fraction. The number blurred as tears welled up in my eyes. I hadn't asked my father for anything in years. Not since he left Mom when I was 16. Not since he remarried that woman who looked at me like I was a stain on her perfect life. Not since he moved into that mansion across town and started his new family chapter. But this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival. I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over his contact. Dad, cell. I pressed call before I could talk myself out of it. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice distant, distracted. Hello? There was classical music playing in the background, the clink of wine glasses. Of course, another one of his dinner parties. Dad, it's me. I need to talk to you about something important. The words caught in my throat. Why was this so hard? Why did asking my own father for help feel like begging a stranger? Can this wait? We have guests over. His tone was already dismissive, already half checked out of the conversation. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. No, Dad. It can't. I'm sick, I need surgery, and I don't have the money. I've tried everything. I've looked into payment plans, but I'm drowning here. I need help. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, he sighed. That heavy, burdened sigh I knew too well. Look, I'll think about it, okay? Let me talk to Patricia and see what we can do. I'll get back to you. Patricia, his wife. The woman who had to approve whether or not his own daughter deserved financial help. Okay, I whispered. Thank you. But even as I said it, something inside me knew. I knew that I'll think about it was just a polite way of saying no. 3 days passed. 3 days of staring at my phone, jumping every time it buzzed, hoping it was him. It never was. The medical bills piled up on my kitchen counter, red urgent stamps screaming at me every time I walked past. My mom came over with groceries she couldn't afford, hugging me tight in her small apartment kitchen. We'll figure this out, baby. We always do. But her eyes were scared, and I hated that I was the reason for that fear. Then I saw it. I was scrolling through Instagram mindlessly, trying to distract myself from the crushing anxiety, when my sister's post popped up. There she was, 23 years old, glossy hair perfectly curled, posing next to a brand new BMW. Midnight blue, leather interior, the works. Her caption read, "Best dad ever, thank you for always believing in me," with a dozen hashtags about blessed life and daddy's girl. My chest tightened. I clicked on the photo, zooming in like maybe I was seeing it wrong, like maybe it was a joke or a rental or something. But no, there in the background was my father, arm around Patricia's waist, both of them beaming with pride. The phone slipped from my hands and clattered onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. $47,000 was too much to help me live, but a luxury car for the daughter who already had everything? That was no problem at all. That was worth celebrating, worth posting, worth bragging about. I sat there on my bathroom floor, the cold tiles pressing against my back, and I let myself fall apart, not because I was surprised. Deep down, I always knew who mattered more in his eyes. But seeing it so publicly, so shamelessly displayed, that broke something in me I didn't know could still break. I called him again, and again, and again. Every call went to voicemail. I sent texts trying to keep my tone calm, trying not to sound desperate. Dad, I really need to talk to you about the surgery. It's getting urgent. Delivered. Read. No response. I tried a different approach. I saw Sarah got a new car. That's great for her. Can we please discuss my situation? Read. No response. The silence was louder than any rejection he could have spoken out loud. It was a choice. An active, deliberate choice to ignore me while I was drowning. My mom found me crying at 2 in the morning, scrolling through old photos of when I was little, when Dad used to call me his first princess, when he'd carry me on his shoulders and promise he'd always protect me. He's not coming, is he? I asked her, my voice small and hollow. She sat down next to me, pulling me into her arms like I was 5 years old again. No, baby, I don't think he is. And that's when I made my decision. I was done waiting for a man who had already made his choice. I was done begging for crumbs of love from someone who had a whole feast to give, just not for me. I created a GoFundMe page at midnight, my hand shaking as I typed out my story. I left out the part about my father. I left out the bitterness and the betrayal. I just explained my condition, the surgery I needed, and asked for help from anyone willing to give it. I shared it on my social media, swallowing my pride with every click. By morning, 20 people had donated. By that afternoon, 50. Friends from high school I hadn't spoken to in years. Co-workers from the restaurant where I waited tables. Neighbors. Strangers who saw my story shared by someone else and decided to help anyway. I picked up extra shifts at work, even though standing for long hours made my condition worse. I sold my laptop, my camera, the guitar I'd saved up for in college. Every dollar counted. Every single cent brought me closer to that surgery, closer to survival. And with every donation notification, every kind message from people who owed me nothing, I realized something powerful. I didn't need my father's money. What I had needed was to know I mattered. And these people, these beautiful, generous people who barely knew me, they showed me I did. The pain got worse. Some mornings I couldn't get out of bed without crying, but I pushed through because giving up wasn't an option. My mom moved in with me for a few weeks, sleeping on my couch, making sure I ate, holding my hair back when the pain made me sick. She was the parent who showed up. She always had been. One day, a check arrived in the mail. $5,000. It was from Mrs. Peterson, my third-grade teacher, a woman I hadn't seen in over 15 years. Inside was a note written in her familiar looping handwriting. "You were always the strongest little girl in my class. You still are. Keep fighting. Love, Mrs. P." I sobbed reading that note, but they were different tears. Not tears of abandonment, but tears of gratitude. I was learning that family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up when you needed them most. It was about who sacrificed for you, who believed in you, who refused to let you fall alone. My father had taught me what family wasn't. Everyone else was teaching me what it could be. Then came the invitation. My sister texted me out of nowhere. "Dad's 60th birthday dinner next Saturday. You should come, it would mean a lot to him." I stared at that message for a long time. The old me would have jumped at the chance, desperate for any scrap of inclusion, but I wasn't that girl anymore. Still, something told me I needed to go. Not for him, for me. To close a chapter I'd been holding open for too long. I texted back a simple, "I'll be there," and left it at that. The restaurant was exactly the type of place my father loved. Expensive, pretentious. The kind where they serve tiny portions on huge plates and call it art. I wore the one nice dress I hadn't sold, did my makeup carefully to hide the exhaustion and pain etched into my face. When I walked in, Patricia saw me first. Her smile was tight, forced, the kind you give to an unwelcome guest you can't turn away. Sarah rushed over, hugging me like we were close, like she hadn't been radio silent during the worst time of my life. "You came. Dad will be so happy." He didn't look happy. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me, shifting in his seat, adjusting his tie. "Sweetheart, you made it." The word sweetheart felt foreign coming from his mouth, like a language he'd forgotten how to speak. I sat down at the far end of the table, away from the family nucleus they'd formed without me. Dinner was painful in every sense. Patricia dominated the conversation with stories about their recent trip to Italy. Sarah gushed about her new car and how Dad had surprised her just because he's the best. And I sat there invisible, pushing food around my plate. Then came the toast. My father stood up, wine glass raised, his face flushed with expensive alcohol and self-satisfaction. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight. 60 years old, can you believe it?" Everyone laughed on cue. "I'm a lucky man. Lucky to have a beautiful wife, a successful career, and most importantly, lucky to have daughters who make me proud every single day." He looked directly at Sarah when he said it. Directly at her, not even a glance in my direction. Something inside me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a quiet final break, like the last thread holding together something that was already torn. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. Conversation stopped. Everyone turned to look at me. I need to say something. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. My father's expression shifted from confusion to warning. Not here, not now. But I was done listening to him dictate when I was allowed to speak, when I was allowed to matter. "You want to talk about daughters who make you proud?" I looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. 3 months ago, I called you. I was sick. I needed surgery. I needed help. Do you remember what you said? He set down his wine glass, his jaw tightening. "This isn't the time. You said you'd think about it. You said you'd get back to me, and you know what? You never did. Not a call, not a text, nothing. But 3 days later, Sarah posted about her brand new BMW. $47,000 for my surgery was too much to think about, but a luxury car for the daughter who already has everything? That didn't require any thinking at all. The table was silent. Patricia's mouth hung open slightly. Sarah looked down at her plate, her face pale. My father stood there frozen, unable to meet my eyes. I worked double shifts until I could barely stand. I sold everything I owned. I asked strangers on the internet for help. And do you know what I learned? That people who owe me nothing gave me more than you ever did. That my third-grade teacher sent me $5,000. That my mom, who you left with nothing, slept on my couch for weeks taking care of me. That family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up. He finally spoke, his voice defensive, wounded. You've always been independent. You never needed me. You thought what? I cut him off. That I didn't need a father? That I didn't deserve your help because I wasn't born to your new wife? That I wasn't worth the investment? I could feel tears burning behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here. Not for him. Independence wasn't a gift you gave me, Dad. It was all you left me with. I didn't choose to not need you. You chose not to be needed. Patricia tried to intercede, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I think you're being unfair. Your father has always what? I turned to her. Always had another family to prioritize? Always had a different daughter to spoil? Please, finish that sentence. She looked to my father for backup, but he had none to give. Sarah, to her credit, looked genuinely shocked, like she was seeing something clearly for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe she'd been too comfortable in her golden child position to notice the daughter left out in the cold. I grabbed my purse, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. I didn't come here to ruin your birthday, Dad. I came here to stop waiting for you to care. I'm done. I'm done hoping you'll choose me. I'm done making excuses for you. And I'm done pretending that your neglect doesn't hurt. I looked at him one last time, memorizing his face. The face of the man who taught me that love could be conditional, that a father's protection wasn't guaranteed. Enjoy your dinner. Enjoy your perfect life. I won't be interrupting it anymore. I walked out of that restaurant with my head high, and I didn't look back. Not when I heard Sarah call my name. Not when I saw my father through the window still standing there like a statue. I got in my car, drove 3 blocks, and then pulled over and cried harder than I ever had in my life. But these tears were different. They weren't tears of a daughter begging for love. They were tears of grief, mourning the father I wished I had, the relationship that never was, the fairy tale ending that would never come. And once I let them out, once I let myself feel every bit of that pain, I felt lighter. The surgery happened 2 weeks later. I'd raised enough through the GoFundMe and my own savings. I went into that operating room scared but not alone. My mom kissed my forehead before they wheeled me away. My best friend from work sat in the waiting room for 6 hours. My old college roommate sent flowers. When I woke up groggy and sore but alive, the first thing I saw was a room full of cards and balloons and people who loved me. My father wasn't there, and for the first time in my life, his absence didn't leave a hole, because the space he should have filled was overflowing with real love from real family. Recovery was slow and painful, but I wasn't facing it alone. My mom stayed with me, cooking meals I could barely eat, helping me shower when I was too weak, reading to me when the boredom of bed rest drove me crazy. Friends visited, bringing movies and gossip and laughter. My manager at work sent a care package with a note saying my job would be waiting when I was ready. Life kept moving forward, and I moved with it, one difficult day at a time. And somewhere in those quiet moments of healing, I realized I was going to be okay. Not because my father finally stepped up, but because I had built my own life, my own support system, my own strength. 3 months after the surgery, after I'd been back at work for a few weeks and life had settled into a new normal, my phone buzzed with a message from him. My heart did that stupid thing where it jumped, where some small part of me that still remembered being 6 years old and thinking my dad could fix anything hoped for something good. The message read, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said at dinner. You were right, I wasn't there for you when you needed me, and I'm sorry. I want to fix this. Can we talk?" I stared at that message for 3 days before responding. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him feel what his silence had felt like to me. But another part, the part that was healing and growing and learning what it meant to set boundaries, knew that closure wasn't about revenge. It was about honesty. I texted back, "Coffee, Saturday at 10, the place on Main Street." No warmth, no reassurance, no making it easy for him. If he wanted to fix this, he'd have to actually show up. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking older than I remembered. Maybe it was the harsh morning light, or maybe I was just seeing him clearly for the first time without the filter of desperate hope. He stood when I approached, awkward, uncertain. "Thank you for meeting me." I sat down without a hug, without a smile. "You have 20 minutes, I have things to do today." The conversation was painful and messy and not at all like the movie reconciliations where everything is tied up neatly with a bow. He apologized, stumbling over words, making excuses before catching himself and trying again. He admitted he'd been a coward, that seeing Sarah every day made it easier to focus on her, that my independence had been a convenient excuse to prioritize the child who demanded his attention. He cried, which I'd never seen him do. He said he wanted another chance, that he'd do better, that he'd prove himself worthy of being my father. I listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, sitting there vulnerable and broken and waiting for my forgiveness, I took a long sip of my coffee before speaking. "I appreciate you saying all of that. I do. But here's what you need to understand. You don't get to walk back into my life like nothing happened. You don't get my trust just because you apologized. Trust is earned, and you have years of absence to make up for." His face fell, but I wasn't done. "I'm not saying never. I'm saying not like this. You want to be in my life, it has to be on my terms. No more broken promises. No more choosing your other family over me. No more making me feel like I have to compete for basic decency." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I understand. What do you need from me?" It was the first time he'd ever asked me that question. I need consistency. I need you to show up, not just when it's convenient, but when it's hard. I need you to understand that a relationship with me isn't something you can buy with guilt money or fix with grand gestures. It's built slowly, with 1,000 small choices to be present. I paused, feeling the weight of every word. "And I need you to know that I don't need you anymore. Not the way I used to. I survived without you, and I'll continue to survive. So if you're going to be here because you actually want to, not because you feel obligated." We left that coffee shop without any dramatic reconciliation, without any promises of instant healing, but we left with something more valuable: honesty. Over the following months, my father did something I'd never seen him do before. He tried, not perfectly. He still made mistakes, still sometimes prioritized poorly, still had to be reminded that actions mattered more than words. But he showed up. He called weekly. He asked about my recovery. He sent articles he thought I'd find interesting. Small things. Consistent things. The kind of things that don't look impressive on Instagram but mean everything in real life. I didn't forgive him right away. Forgiveness isn't a light switch you flip because someone apologizes. It's a slow thaw, a gradual softening that happens when trust is rebuilt brick by brick. Some days I was angry all over again. Some days I didn't want to talk to him. And I allowed myself to feel those things without guilt, because I'd learned that protecting my peace wasn't selfish. It was necessary. My relationship with Sarah improved too, slowly. She reached out after that disastrous dinner, apologizing for being oblivious, for not seeing the disparities in how we were treated. We started having coffee once a month, building something new between us that wasn't based on competing for Dad's attention, but on actually getting to know each other as adults. Today, a year after that surgery that nearly broke me in every way possible, I'm healthy. I'm working at a job I love. I have a small apartment filled with photos of people who showed up when it mattered. My relationship with my father is complicated, imperfect, and far from the fairy tale I once dreamed of, but it's honest. And maybe that's more valuable than perfect. He'll never be the dad who puts me first, who loves me the way I needed to be loved as a child. That ship has sailed. But he can be someone who tries, someone who learns, someone who acknowledges his failures and works to be better. The biggest lesson I learned through all of this isn't about him, though. It's about me. I learned that asking for help isn't weakness, it's courage. I learned that the people who matter will show up without being begged. I learned that blood doesn't automatically make someone family, and that love without action is just empty words. I learned that I am strong enough to survive rejection from the person who should have loved me unconditionally. And most importantly, I learned that my worth isn't determined by who chooses to see it. If you're reading this, and you've ever felt invisible to a parent, overlooked by someone who was supposed to protect you, or abandoned when you needed help the most. I see you. Your pain is valid, your anger is justified, and your decision to move forward, whether that's with or without that person in your life, is yours to make. Don't let anyone tell you that forgiveness is mandatory, or that family loyalty means accepting mistreatment. You deserve people who show up. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. And you deserve to build a life surrounded by people who prove every single day that you matter. So if you're struggling, if you're drowning, if you're wondering whether anyone would care if you disappeared, reach out, ask for help, share your story. You'll be amazed by how many strangers become family when you're brave enough to be vulnerable. And if the people who should love you can't be bothered to show up, build your own family, choose your own people, create your own support system. Because at the end of the day, the family we choose is often stronger than the family we're born into. And remember, you are not defined by who failed to love you. You are defined by how you loved yourself enough to survive anyway. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt the pain of being the forgotten child or the overlooked sibling, leave a comment below. Share your story. You never know who needs to hear that they're not alone. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real stories about real struggles and real survival. Because we're all in this together, fighting our own battles, and sometimes just knowing someone else understands can make all the difference.